Have you ever felt like the world had turned its back on you? Judged, abandoned, considered worthless? That is the story of Cairo, a dog who was once considered useless. No one wanted to adopt him. But then, a man saw something that no one else saw. And in just a moment of life and death, Cairo did the unthinkable, changing his destiny and leaving the world stunned. What happened? And how could a seemingly lost life become a legend? Before we continue, please comment and tell us where in the world you are watching this video from. And if you believe in touching stories, don't forget to subscribe now, because tomorrow there will be a special story just for you. Have you ever felt like the world had turned its back on you? Like you had lost your purpose, your worth? This is the story of a creature who was once called broken, useless, and hopeless. But only one person saw what no one else saw. And then, a miracle happened. A blizzard swept through Nome, Alaska, a cold land where the wind was like a knife cutting through the white fields, where man and nature still fight to survive every day. Inside a small rescue shelter, amid the echoing barks of dozens of other dogs, Cairo sat huddled in the corner of his cage. He was not running, wagging his tail, or trying to attract attention like the others. He was just quiet, like someone who had lost himself. Cairo had been rejected 4 times. 4 different families had taken him in. 4 hopes. 4 broken hearts. Every time a door closes, the little sparks that remain inside him fade. They say he can't be trained, that there's something wrong with him, that he's worthless. Have you ever felt like that? Surrounded by fear, labeled with a label you can't fight back, rejected over and over again, to the point where you start to believe you're not worthy? That's Cairo. But then, one snowy day, a man walks in, Orion Hale, a former rescue pilot, a man who flew through fierce storms to save lives, a warrior in the sky. But now, he doesn't fly anymore. An accident, a terrible night, a sudden storm. The engine freezes, the plane crashes. Orion survives, but he loses his best friend. He couldn't forgive himself. And so he left the sky, left his old life, and came to Nome as a lost soul. Today, he had no intention of adopting a dog. But as he passed the rows of kennels, his eyes stopped on Cairo. Not because he ran up to greet them happily like the others, not because he looked strong or special, but because of his eyes. 2 pairs of eyes met, a human and a dog. 2 people who had lost themselves. That dog is not for you. The rescue worker's voice pulled Orion out of his thoughts. Why? He's been returned 4 times. He's too scared to be trained. What happened to him? Nobody knows. He was found alone in the woods, in the middle of winter, unharmed, but no one was looking for him. We think he was a rescue dog, or a working dog, but for some reason, he lost all his instincts. Orion said nothing. He just knelt, gently reaching out his hand to Cairo. At first, the dog didn't react. It just looked at him, its eyes deep and empty, as if it was used to being left behind. But then, after a few seconds, it trembled slightly. Not because of fear, but because it was sensing something different. Do you believe in the invisible connection between 2 broken souls? Orion had seen it in soldiers with PTSD, people who couldn't return to normal life after what they had been through. And now, he saw it in a dog. I'll adopt him. The rescue worker was stunned. Are you sure? It will only get in your way, Orion. I think I've heard that before. They signed the papers. The cage door opened. Orion walked slowly, turned to look at Cairo, and patted his leg. Cairo hesitated. He didn't know what to do. And then he stood up. No tail wagging, no jumping up. But he followed him. That was all he could do. A first step on his journey to finding himself. If you've made it this far, you're probably one of the few who can see what the world often ignores. That broken souls still carry a glimmer of light, just waiting for a chance to shine. You too have a seed of compassion in your heart, and the world needs more people like you. Please like this video, not for the algorithm or the number of views, but because you believe everyone deserves to deserve a second chance. Have you ever tried to change something only to be ridiculed by the world? Do you know what it feels like to fight your fears while everyone around you waits for you to fail? This is not just a story about a dog. This is a story about perseverance, about faith, about how strong broken souls can be, if only someone believes in them. The cold wind cuts through the snowy fields. Cairo's first day in Orion's new home is not as warm as it seems. Early in the morning, a nightmare wakes Cairo. He jumps up, panting, his eyes panicking as if he had been thrown back to someplace in the past. Orion sits up, gently placing a hand on his back. "It's okay, Cairo. You're safe." But is it? Stepping out the door, Orion tries to lead Cairo out into the snow. A normal golden retriever would have rushed in, burying himself in the soft snow. But Cairo, he stopped in the doorway, not a step forward. The wind whistled through the trees, blowing tiny flakes of snow into the air. And at that moment, Orion saw Cairo shiver slightly. He wasn't cold. He was scared. Orion frowned. A dog raised in Alaska is afraid of the snow? He knelt, patting his legs. "Come on, Cairo." Cairo looked at him, then out at the vast snowfield. A tense moment passed quietly, and then slowly. He took a step, then another. But as soon as his feet sank into the soft snow, he jumped back, as if the ground beneath him might collapse at any moment. Orion narrowed his eyes. What had happened to this dog? Laughter all around. Doubtful eyes. Orion's neighbors, who had worked on the gnome rescue team, watched from a distance, whispering to each other. "You adopted a broken dog, Orion." "A golden retriever afraid of the snow. Are you kidding? You think you can turn him into a rescue dog? Who are you trying to save with a dog like that?" Orion didn't respond. He knew that feeling all too well. The feeling of being looked at and told that he couldn't do anything anymore. They had said it to him before, after the accident that year. Orion will never fly again. Orion is no longer himself. He used to be a good pilot, but now, no one trusts him anymore. And now, they were saying the same thing about Cairo. The early days, small challenges, but not easy. Cairo flinched every time he heard the sound of a plane engine. Orion could see it tense up, its eyes darting, its breathing quickening. He tried throwing a snowball forward, unconsciously testing whether Cairo would follow. But instead of chasing, it crouched down, eyes wide, waiting. Waiting for what? Orion wasn't sure. A reflex, an old memory, a habit so ingrained that even if Cairo couldn't remember exactly, its body remembered something. But there was one thing Orion knew for sure. Fear didn't go away. It needed to be replaced with faith. Orion didn't give up. He didn't force Cairo to change all at once. He spent time with it, little by little. He walked it every day, not too far, not into deep snow. He didn't force it to run through the snow, but instead sat down beside it, letting it get used to the cold feeling of the ground. He didn't ignore its fear, but he didn't let it take over either. And then one day, something strange happened. the first moment of change. It got dark quickly in Nome. Orion was used to that. But this time, when he was about to head back home, Cairo didn't follow right away. It stopped, its eyes staring out at the white fields. "Cairo?" The dog didn't respond. Orion stepped closer. And then he noticed Cairo's ears pricked up. For the first time since he'd been here, he heard something. Something that didn't scare him, but reminded him of something. "What did you hear?" The wind whistled through the trees. The night stretched on. Orion looked in Cairo's direction, but he saw nothing. But Cairo did. Or perhaps he remembered. A very small part of this dog was beginning to awaken. If you are still listening to this story, you are one of the few who have the patience to see the beauty hidden beneath the seemingly worthless things. You may have been overlooked by this world, underestimated, given labels you never agreed with. But you are still here, still going, just like Cairo. Like this video if you believe that every life has a fire waiting to be lit. Do you believe that there is an instinct in each of us that never really dies? Even if it is buried under the dust of time, even if it is drowned by pain and loss, it only takes one moment, one situation, one opportunity. It will flare up again. And when it does, it can change the fate of not only yourself, but also those around you. Tonight, in the most intense snowstorm Nome has ever seen, a forgotten instinct has awakened. The blizzard has lasted for 3 hours. The wind howls through the cracks in the windows like sharp blades, and the snow covers the ground, thick enough to bury a car in a matter of hours. No one goes outside on nights like this. No one can survive if they are trapped in this cold wilderness. Orion is used to storms, but this time, something is wrong. Cairo jerks awake. It is not because of the thunder, not because of the gusts of wind. He heard something. At first, it was just a low growl, like an unconscious reflex. Then suddenly, he rushed to the door, barking wildly. Orion sprang up reflexively. This was not the Cairo he knew. The dog who had been afraid of the dark, who had trembled in the wind, was now growling as if something was waiting outside. He opened the door and stood frozen. A small ray of light in the blizzard, a distress signal flickering faintly in the darkness. Orion squinted. A snowmobile had capsized only a few hundred meters away. But in this storm, a few hundred meters was like an abyss. No one could see it from a distance. No one. Except Cairo. He felt his chest tighten. There was no way to contact the rescue team. If anyone was trapped in there, they would only have minutes before they froze completely. Orion grabbed his coat, ready to rush out. But as soon as he reached the door, Cairo was gone. The storm seemed to swallow them all. Orion ran after Cairo's footprints, but after a few seconds, the snow covered everything. He couldn't see anything. He couldn't hear anything. But then, a bark rang out. Not far away, Cairo was digging through the snow with his whole body. His feet moved faster than Orion had ever seen them, as if he had never forgotten how to do it. And then, from under the thick snow, a small arm emerged. There was someone there. 2 children. A boy of about 8, huddled beneath the snow. A smaller girl, barely conscious. Orion felt his heart constrict. If Cairo hadn't discovered them in time, there was no time to think. Orion quickly pulled them both up, wrapping them in his coat, trying to shield them from the biting cold wind. But the problem didn't end there. The boy held Orion tightly, his lips purple. "And my father." Orion's heart felt like it was being squeezed. There was still one more person. He looked around, but with this storm, he couldn't see more than a meter away. But Cairo could. He rushed forward again, without hesitation, without fear. And just a few seconds later, he disappeared into the night. Orion stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. There was a moment when he wondered, can I believe this? Believe that a dog that had lost all its rescue instincts, that was afraid of everything, could now save a person's life on this stormy night. But perhaps faith does not come from reason. It comes from moments when you have no other choice. And Orion chose to believe in Cairo. A few minutes later, the wind was still howling. Everything seemed swallowed up in the darkness. Then, a movement. The silhouette of Cairo appeared, its golden fur stained with white snow, its eyes shining in the storm. And behind it, a wounded man, the father of 2 children. Cairo had found him. Cairo had saved him. Orion could not believe his eyes. The dog had been afraid of the dark, was afraid of the snow. Now, he had conquered both to do what he was born to do, save people. Cairo was no longer the scared dog. As they returned to the safety of the cabin, Orion looked at Cairo, and he saw something that had changed forever. No more blank eyes, no more lost. In those eyes, a light had returned, and Orion realized Cairo had not lost his instincts. He had just needed a moment to remember who he was. If you are still here, if you are still following this story, perhaps you too believe what the world often ignores, that nothing is ever truly lost. It is just waiting to be awakened again. You have a heart big enough to see what others do not. Please share this video, not only to spread this story, but to send a powerful message. Everyone deserves a chance to remember who they are. Have you ever felt like you were standing at a defining moment in your life? A moment where you either prove your worth or you'll be forgotten forever. This was it. The moment when Cairo, the once useless, rejected dog, faced the greatest test of his life. News of the snowstorm's miracle spread faster than anything else in the small town of Nome. A golden retriever had charged into the stormy night, across the frozen snowfields, to save 3 lives. A special rescue team from Anchorage had heard about Cairo. They couldn't believe the story. A dog like that? A golden retriever who could do what even the toughest huskies and malamutes couldn't? They made an offer. One final test. If Cairo is a rescue dog, he will have to find and save a missing person on ice in the Bering Sea, a place where even modern technology has difficulty. The skeptics appear. It was just luck. A golden retriever can't handle this challenge. The last storm was a surprise, but this time, he'll fail. Orion hears it all. He doesn't respond. He just looks at Cairo. Cairo is no longer the scared dog he was when Orion first met him. But in his eyes, Orion still sees a hint of worry. Can he do it? The day of the test comes. A helicopter takes them out into the middle of the frozen sea, where huge icebergs float on the water, as cold as knives. The temperature drops so low that a person can only survive for 10 minutes if he falls into the water. The missing man was a local fisherman, lost on the ice floe the night before. No one knew exactly where he was. Radar equipment couldn't pick him up because of the thick ice. Only Cairo. He was the last hope. Cairo stepped onto the ice. The cold was bitter, the wind howling through the ice like invisible blades. At first, he hesitated. An old memory flooded back. The blizzards, the chaotic sounds, a crunch underfoot. The fear returned. Orion bent down, looking into his eyes. You did it once. You can do it again. A moment of silence. Then, Cairo began to move. He ran slowly at first, sniffing, ears straining, eyes focused. Orion and the rescue team didn't say a word, just watched his every move. Then suddenly, it stopped. It lowered itself, legs tensed, eyes forward. It had found something. Orion ran after Cairo. And then he saw a large crack in the ice. Beneath the thin layer of ice, a man lay motionless. He was unconscious, trapped between two layers of ice, almost beyond hope. "We have someone missing," Orion shouted. The rescue team immediately sprang into action. One man tied a rope to Orion, and he dove into the ice, using an axe to break the remaining thin layer of ice. Time was running out. He grabbed the man's shirt, pulling hard, but his body was too cold, almost unresponsive. "No, don't die," Orion shouted. And then, the unbelievable happened. Cairo lunged forward, biting into the man's shirt with his teeth, pulling hard. With the strength of both, the man was finally pulled to the surface of the ice. The rescue team quickly wrapped him in a blanket to keep him warm, checking his heartbeat. 1 second, 2 seconds, then a breath. "He's alive!" Orion gasped, almost falling to the ice, but he wasn't the only one. Cairo, exhausted from the last strong pull, also collapsed. Orion rushed to its side, his trembling hands placed on its cold, wet fur. "Cairo, wake up!" The entire rescue team held their breath. No one dared to speak. Then, slowly, Cairo opened his eyes. At that moment, no one could doubt it anymore. Cairo is no longer an outcast, no longer a dog afraid of snow, no longer a useless golden retriever. He has become a legend. If you are still following this story, it means you have a heart big enough to believe in what the world often ignores, that anyone can change their destiny, if only someone believes in them. Have you ever had a moment like Cairo's, when the whole world doubted you, but you still chose to move forward? Please comment Cairo's name below if this story has touched you, because sometimes just someone calling something by its name will never be forgotten. Do you believe that love and faith can make the impossible possible? Do you believe that even the most broken souls can come back stronger than ever? Cairo's name quickly became an icon in the Alaska rescue team. Those who once mocked him, who once thought he was a broken dog, now stood up and applauded every time he entered the training camp. From a dog afraid of the white snow, Cairo now crossed the frozen fields with a clear mission: to save people. But there was one thing that was more special than anything else. No one called him a useless golden retriever. No one thought of him as just a pet dog anymore. Because he was no longer just a dog. He was a warrior. He was a light in the cold nights. He was a hope for those lost in the frozen land. But Cairo's story doesn't end there. One morning, as snow gently fell on the rooftops of Nome, Orion received a distress call. An expedition team was missing in the Alaskan wilderness. No sign of contact, no accurate GPS location, and they had only hours before the next storm hit. No one was sure if the expedition team was still alive, and Cairo was their last hope. Orion looked down at his companion. He didn't need to say a word. Cairo was ready. As the helicopter landed in the wilderness, Cairo jumped down to the snowy ground with determination. There was no hesitation, no fear. He ran ahead, Orion and the rescue team following. He sniffed the wind, listening for sounds that humans couldn't hear. And then, after 40 minutes of searching, he stopped. Orion felt Cairo's body tense, his ears perked up, his nose moving faster. He'd found something. And then, he dashed away. That's right. Beneath a fallen tree, the members of the expedition lay motionless, their bodies stiff from the cold. Cairo barked loudly. He rushed forward, rubbing his nose against the face of the nearest woman. There was no response. Orion rushed forward, checking her heartbeat. There was still a glimmer of hope. Cairo had done what even modern technology could not do. Without him, they would have been buried under the thick snow and lost forever. He had not only saved them, he had changed their fate. And that was what made him a legend. Cairo, a name that cannot be forgotten. No one can deny this anymore. Cairo is no longer an abandoned dog. He is no longer the frightened creature who once cowered in the corner of the rescue camp. He is a living legend. The people of Nome, who once doubted him, now tell his story on long winter nights. His name is engraved on the rescue team's wall of honor. But for Orion, none of that matters. What matters most is Cairo has found himself again. If you are still here, if you have followed this story to the end, you are one of the few who understand the value of compassion, perseverance, of unconditional faith. You have a big heart, a heart that wants to make this world a better place, that wants to see small lives given a second chance. Thank you, from the bottom of our hearts, for taking the time to be a part of this story. Out of millions of stories out there, you chose to stop, listen, and feel. That says you are special. Someone with compassion, understanding, and a heart that is always inclined toward good. Cairo's journey is not just the story of an abandoned dog. It is a mirror of the moments in our lives, the moments of falling, the times of doubt, the moments of losing ourselves. But if Cairo can find his way back, so can we. And we believe that you have a story of your own, a moment when you stood up, fought, proved your worth. If you could give this story a score from 0 to 10, how many would you rate it? Leave your number in the comments, because who knows, this story might just inspire someone out there. If you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, please like to spread the word. And if Cairo's story touched your heart, please share to inspire someone who needs a reason to keep going. But don't leave just yet. If you loved Cairo's journey, I have another story that will touch your heart just as much. A life that seemed to be buried in darkness. But then something extraordinary happened. Are you curious to know what happened? Stay, because the next story will keep you glued to it.